Absolutely. Kevin, do you want to?
Okay, so I think it would be very important to spend a bit of time trying to define what it is that the community really wants. It's, information in an unfiltered way. It comes in all sorts of different forms, and if people, most patients with people living with motor neuron disease, certainly early in their disease, but often throughout it, are very hungry for information. So in our clinic, we spend a lot of time talking to people, in great detail about whatever they want to talk about. So they have a one-to-one with somebody who's a clinician specializing in MND and also a researcher who knows most of what there is to know. So that's the kind of ultimate experience that should leave somebody feeling reasonably well informed and satisfied, although I'm sure I wouldn't be complacent that that's already what happens in clinic. And then other people are worried that there's something they should know that they don't have access to that will make a difference to them in terms of some treatment or something they should be doing, and that's a different sort of information, which is this concern that there's something out there that they don't know about, they should know about. And that's a whole different sort of message in terms of communicating that. And then thirdly, there's what we're doing now, which is bringing together a community of people to share the problem. And I mean, that is, everyone's a winner there, because we have all hugely, I think in the last few years, we've greatly benefited from, David, Nicola and Lee and others who are there talking to us about this. I think that is fantastic. So that's another form of communication. And they all require slightly different sorts of media. So I won't say much about social media because I'm not on it, and I don't think I'll ever be on it. And so I'm one of these people, Lee, that you can wag your finger at if you like, but I'm not going to do it. Okay, so I mean, it's because well, lots of reasons. Anyway, although our lab does have a Twitter thing, but I just wonder whether, to really democratize information, what you probably need is a bit of professional help, in how we communicate. I think as researchers, most of us are incredibly willing, not willing, enthusiastic about communicating what we want. And there are a lot of us now. So if we had some way through the funders to establish, somebody who would do a weekly or monthly podcast or video interview with a researcher, and we'd only have to do it once every couple of years, each lab, where you simply get someone to talk about what they're doing and talk about the disease, and that is available to the community. And if people want to sign up for that, or a YouTube channel or something, that you've got a regular thing that people will tune into once a week or once a month, and they'll know that they feel connected to what's going on, because they'll never get physically to MNDA meetings, etc., in enough volume to cover everybody. That's what I think.
No, it's fantastic, and I think it makes me wonder if we could do this part of MND Institute. If, for example, a monthly podcast, we highlight a lab, a research, or a paper. It's informal like this. We could just disseminate this kind of information, discuss it.
Can I just comment on that briefly? I know people got their hand up, but the MND Association already has a kind of science blog. I'm pretty sure he's going to talk about that. But I think so I wouldn't want to duplicate that, but I think having some kind of discussion panel like this once a month might be an approach that would work, because I don't think other groups are doing that. So you could have the main lab person being the lead person to interrogate on a panel discussion like this, and then people can join and interrogate them, something like that. Anyway, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, so that's actually been covered a lot of what I was going to say, but the main point to make is that there is obviously always multiple mediums that work for different people, and so understanding that all those bases are covered, be it via Augmented excellent social media posts or the MNDA podcast, for example, ensuring that there is a continuation and a spectrum of ways in which people can access information has to be the most appropriate and the best win for all. Podcasts are great because obviously they sit there forever as well. So, Ammar was talking about the fact that the environment changes, but quite often you can go back and revisit a recording and you can find it accessible and it'll be the same, and you can go on that journey and listen to it as time goes on. So they do serve as a resource which you can go back and look at. the other point I was going to make, I just want to have a bit of a call out for the MND Encourage event as well, which obviously is similar to the conferences, but is a great forum by which there's an open conversation between both early career researchers and more kind of established scientists as well, to talk about research that's happening in the field. And that access to early career researchers, where you have that kind of new, more kind of novel research, is really just as important as some of the kind of the old wizened heads we have on this call talking about their research as well.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So, Sophie, yeah, go on, David.
I'm sorry.
No.
It's not been able to put the hand up. I think you've kind of almost hit it on the head. The last three or four of you. Now that we have collaboration in research for MND, or as much of it as we can get, we also need collaboration in this type of forum. So it does sometimes become a bit confusing for the general MND population to see different forums going on, different fora, if you like. So, for example, and I'm not knocking them, each I'm sure was fine, but if we could streamline them, it would make things more efficient. So, for example, at the beginning of last year, we had the new DODI document on its strategy going forward. Now, I actually helped them get some patients onto that and was very happy to do so. Paul, this year, and again, I'm not knocking the LifeArc stuff, we've got yours, and I'm sure there are 3 or 4 other. Now, this starts to make the audience disintegrate a bit and not come together. So, as Ammar has said, perhaps we can streamline it through the Institute, bringing everybody. I mean, everybody on here is kind of part of the Institute, I think. That is one of the problems. It's got a bit diffuse sometimes.
No, thanks, David. Sophie, do you have any comment on this? You put a lot of effort in MNDA, also communicating this information, and there's a lot to cover. Every week there's something, either a clinical trial or like a new research or something happening. Would be great to have your perspective.
Yeah, this is exactly it. We do put in a lot of effort into communicating all the research that we fund, and also research that we don't fund, just for the benefits of the public. And there is always a lot of updates to provide, and it might be actually useful to streamline this a little bit more amongst the funders. And as Paul mentioned as well, podcasts, we did actually attempt that in the past. The uptake wasn't fantastic, but I do actually think that if we collaborate between the funders and we really unite the community and increase the awareness that these resources are out there, it might really increase the uptake. And there's a final aspect as well, of course, which is that we do have researchers talking about the research at the MND Association local branches, but it might be beneficial to have something more online so that everyone can attend.
I kind of like feel there is like different audience and all they're connected to different generation. So I'm for example, now TikTok is happening. I'm not sure, there are like a couple of MND also advocate on TikTok, and especially in the US, and they managed to capture a lot of people. We are not on that. So for example, like would be, I think our generation also different, like the way of generation consume also media. So Twitter is where most of these MND researchers are, not everyone, but so Facebook, I'm not on Facebook, for example, there's also, but probably streamlining of this effort in a way could help also, and need to feed into multiple social platforms also. Ammar, do you have any comment on this?
I do. Nicola had her hand up before me, so
sorry,
if you don't mind, I'll go after Nicola.
Well, I was often a bit of a tangent, but I think picking up a point I think you made, Ammar, about the MNDA Encourage event.
No,
so that's with early career researchers. And the event I came to, Ahmed, she was an early career researcher, wasn't she?
Yeah, and Sarah's here, and please unmute yourself if you enjoy yourself. Yeah.
Well, it was such an excellent presentation, and it's the first time I felt I've really understood that type of research. And, you know, for me, I think, would it be a good opportunity if we did have more early career researchers and, you know, talking about their research? And just a point you made, Sophie, one of the things I think for me with the podcast is it's a bit too general. Whereas what I like is hearing in detail what, you know, really understanding the research, understanding where the, you know, I mean, this presentation we heard, Ahmad, she'd been working for 5 years on this particular.
Yeah, over 5 years. And I think it was really good to also to know the amount of effort that researchers also put to reach publication point. So before that, like for example, you could Sarah managed to collect one of the biggest C9 cohorts in the world, and that took about 7 years minimum. Then doing the actual science, that's really long, like probably 5 years. So there is so much going on in the background, and I think podcast is not interactive, so you can just sometimes using similar format like this, you can just interrupt and ask questions. It's informal, and I'm hoping for something similar to this. Ammar?
Yeah, so I had 2 comments really. One was as part of the MND Research Institute early career researcher efforts that are happening, we've got early career researchers twinned with somebody living with motor neuron disease. I think some of the people on the call are in that program. So one thing you could do would be, whenever you have a presentation with an early career researcher, if you did a format like this, you could have the person living with MND interrogating the early career researcher in an interactive format like this, for example. That might work quite nicely. You'd have both then. And then you could have the grey-haired woman or man scientist as the moderator, so that then you'd have a, I don't know, that might be one thing that would work. The other thing I was going to say was we have to be aware as well that we're not just communicating on a national level, we're communicating internationally, and other people are also doing the same internationally. And so we should probably either make the effort to make it truly global, or at least work with our global partners. I mean, I notice on this call, for example, we've got
we have from America, Australia.
From Australia. Hello, Anthony. Must be very late for you.
Hi, everybody.
So you know, having a kind of global reach, I think that's also important.
Absolutely, and I think it's also really useful for the researchers also to communicate their research with people with MND in less scientific way, just like more humane way of communication. Kevin?
Well, I was going to say pretty much the same as Ammar, really. I think what I meant by a podcast was a conversation between a researcher and somebody living with motor neuron disease, because the chances are that they would then ask the questions that many people in the community would be interested in. So it would have a much greater, rather than a didactic presentation, me as a researcher, you know, telling you what I found. I think if I had a conversation, if David or Nicola or Leo and I sat down and had a conversation, that would be very interesting, actually, and it will probably bring out lots of things about the research that I hadn't kind of realized I had to communicate, you know. So that kind of thing would be very powerful.
Yeah, this is what we tried during the meeting with Sarah, is to know more about her as a researcher also, and why she chose basically to be an MND researcher, and her journey also from collection to also doing the analysis and being also tenured, and how this risk also losing jobs, like a more human way of like a communication. I think we need more like this kind of less formal way of communication, rather than just INCAS or ALS symposium way of communicating information. We have Anthony here also from Australia. Do you want to say anything? Anthony also leads a group also in MND.
Yeah, I'm just a visitor here, and I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to participate, and it's great to see everybody on the phone. I'm the co-lead with my colleague, Dr. Lauren Flynn, who is on parental leave at the moment, and we both lead the MND Genetics and Therapeutics Group and have significant collaborations with University College London. I don't want to take up more of your valuable time.
Yeah, thank you very much. So probably I want to move a little bit to a different discussion now about the focus of this working group is how could we optimize clinical trial or also drug discovery. And one of the things that I'm interested in is to know the perspective of people with MND about this process. So, Of course, the ultimate aim is to find cure for this condition or to slow the progression. And also, but we also would be great to know what's important for you as well. David, I want to put you on the spot. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I try and take a step back here from my privileged position of, well, one, having slowly progressive MND and being able to be involved with the likes of many of the people on this call and others, so that I've learned a lot. I wasn't a science student like Mr. Millard Lee, but I've learned a lot, and so I've become even more privileged than other patients. So I'm trying to give the perspective of people, let's say, a step further back from that. And in my head, a lot of people out there, a lot of MND patients will think of research and clinical trials. How can I get on one? I want to get on one. What they don't understand, and these are the things that I've picked up over the last few years, is how important target discovery is, how important progression measurement is. All those things actually that are in the building blocks, well, most of them are in the building blocks of the Institute. You know, the biobanking, the data, bringing the data together, all that kind of thing. The more we can, I don't want to lower expectations exactly, but the more we can get people to understand that you need to find the targets before you can find the drugs, whether repurposed or new, the better. And people will grasp and be more enthusiastic to come on trials that seemingly aren't, you know, going to get them on. You know, I mean, I did, because it was like the first 2 years, get on one trial at King's, the cytokinetics one. But I was also happy because I was beginning to understand the importance of measurement to go on one with James Bashford, where he was measuring my and others fasciculations. So, but people need to understand that, otherwise then they won't be particularly interested. They want the drugs trials, you know, they don't necessarily want the practical building blocks, but they should do, and we need to try and get that over if we can.
Thank you very much, David. We have also Giovanna here from also now LifeArc. So it would be great to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great opportunity to be here. Yes, I just wanted to advocate, especially in terms of opening up borders and break down barriers, as well as data sharing, in terms of bringing together the different research communities across the UK and beyond, in terms of trying to promote data sharing across different domains to better understand target opportunities for new targets, validation of new targets. There is a lot of science, excellent science going on, and so I would totally advocate the promotion of, you know, bringing together the researchers communities, as well as, you know, I'm coming from the UK Dementia Research Institute, which has also a very good, as you know, group of motor neuron disease researchers. Many of them are involved as well in the MND-RI. And there are also a very big, very interesting community of early career researchers that are very keen to share their own findings, as well as share the data across different modalities that could be helpful to progress understanding and treatment development in this devastating disorder.
Thanks, Giovanna. We have Sarah also from UK. Do you want to add anything?
No, I can just reiterate what Giovanna just said, and that's I guess that's why I came on the video as well, just to say hi. I think
Hi,
hey, the DRI Centre has seen some restructuring and new hires and new leadership, and so we're in the process of building new ties and relationships with the MNDRI and with others, and definitely very keen to be involved in this community. And for me, particularly through the connection with the Demon Network, of course, it's a very natural fit here.
Thank you very much. Like, I think that's really good point also. Like, we have the UK MND Institute, also, but we have also UK DRI MND also researchers. And although that there are a lot of overlap, I'm a good example between both. But I think streamlining this effort will be like really helpful for many people. Giovanna, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. As Sarah also was saying, in the end, no, the patients and the benefit of the patients is what needs to guide what we do in everything that we do. So I think science goes beyond barriers. You need to just avoid all these barriers and try to really have the patient as the first and foremost North Star, let's say. And there is fantastic science. I can know that because I'm now learning more from the LifeArc side as well. And I'm familiar with the UKDRI as well as now familiar obviously more with the MND initiatives and programs. And there are overlaps, there are synergies, there is incredible opportunities for actually synergize even more and learn from each other, as well as doing something, even accelerating progress across different domains. And I'm pretty sure that also within the UKDRI, there could what has been found, what has been discovered by the UKDRI, as well as the resources that the UKDRI has in terms of communications, in terms of patient engagement, in terms of bringing together the early career researchers communities. I was coordinating cross-center themes within the UKDRI. So there are opportunities there to also engage in the wider sense, the wider type of research community. This is already happening in other diseases like Parkinson's disease, for example, or vascular dementia. So I don't see why maybe there could be opportunities to really catalyze the progress, and then as well catalyze the merging of the research communities for progress.
Thanks, Giovanna. I can see Nicola's also hand is up. So, Nicola, you the other day used a metaphor being, and I think it might be useful in this scenario. And I think you can see a lot of people doing a lot of work, but people with MND are not aware of all these initiatives, programs, and also researchers working every day to trying to find treatment for MND.
Yeah, so okay, I'm going to share my analogy with a very wide group of people, but we see a lot of people who think there's hardly any research happening. Nothing's happening in the UK. It's hopeless. But my analogy I shared with you, Ahmad, is if let's say you're stuck on Everest. You're facing certain death. And there are two scenarios. One scenario is no one's coming to help you. You're stuck there. The other scenario is, there are people trying to help you. They're trying to scramble the helicopters. People are coming. And, in both scenarios, you might end up dying, but you would feel an awful lot better in the second scenario. And I feel, it really boosts my morale when just in this meeting today, just hearing the enthusiasm and the huge effort that goes into, even if, we're all realistic, we know, things are not necessarily going to happen quickly, but it's morale boosting. But the question I was going to ask Ahmad, moving on, I can see the benefit for me, but what is the benefit for you as research? What's the benefit for you as researchers having people on your trial team as part of your, is there a benefit?
I can see Ammar raising his hand. Do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, I think I can happily answer. There's a massive benefit. And one of the things that I find interesting is I never thought there would be a benefit until I was forced to do it. And I see my colleagues in the US aren't in that situation yet, and they're a bit surprised when we have people living with MND as co-applicants on grants, for example. They find that a bit surprising, or at least they have recently. Maybe they've changed now. But having people living with motor neuron disease involved in designing the science, in writing the grant, in being on the management groups. For example, we've got people on the trial management group for Lighthouse 2. They're also co-applicants in the grant. They're in the trial steering committee, etc. It means that we know that whatever we do, at least one person living with the condition, often more, thinks it's an appropriate thing to do. And that's useful because if I design a trial from a scientific point of view, it might not be very attractive to somebody living with motor neuron disease. But if I have somebody living with motor neuron disease helping advise how that trial design should be, then I know it's patient friendly, at least to some extent. And that means that recruitment will be better and the trial will be better. So you can do that for all science. If you have people involved, you're answering a relevant question, you're designing your science better. And it means that also when you're communicating, you can take the advice of that person. What are the best messages? You understand how to translate this science into a lay language, for example. All of it, there's a lot of benefits.
Yeah, the other thing
that wasn't why I had my hand up, Ahmed. So
yeah,
I'll keep my hand up if it's okay.
Yeah. So the thing is, like for me, like, do you have to meet someone with MND? And I feel like otherwise you are like, I think there is a separation, and this separation like is not helping. For example, like Ammar always encouraged us like to be in the clinic at least once or twice, and we do that for all our like students and researchers. For example, like I remember one of the days, like one of the participants complained about itching, for example, and then that person mentioned that this itching happened associated started before MND. So it is always stuck in my head, and I was wondering why this itching, and multiple people complained about it. So when we designed the non-motor symptoms survey, we added that also, and it shows that there is also non-motor symptoms happened also before the MND developed, and so that's one example. Like also, like if also it's really important like to meet somebody with MND. Like it's not just a whole genome or a number or participant, and you will stop also using the word patient or subject or this kind of communication. You're like a scientific also communication, because they are friends or like people you met, and I think removing the barriers like will not help. And that's one example of that. Making surveys better, making also your research better. You communicate also information in a better way. And I can see here Martina, who's also was an MND scientist at King's, and she moved also like now to the ALS International Alliance. And I think she got both perspective here. Go on, Martina.
Yeah, once you're a scientist, you're never past that.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for having me here. It's great to be here. Certainly, I was an MND researcher in the UK and then in the US. Now we're with the Alliance. So I've seen very different approaches to this issue that you're discussing. I definitely think that there are places in the world where there's more attention to that. And I definitely think there is a big movement of moving towards including people with lived experience in any type of research, which I think is very refreshing. As the Alliance, obviously, we are very interested in making sure that we can reach population worldwide. And so anything that we can do to help and support that, it's definitely a huge step forward for us.
Yeah, thanks, Martina.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Paul?
Yeah, my comment was really just a follow on to Ammar's answer for Nicola's previous question. We don't work in the clinical trial space at LifeArc. We're kind of generally a bit earlier in the process of drug discovery. So for us, the real benefit of working with patients and getting their insight is really to understand what those priorities are for our science. What direction should we be facing, and what would our ultimate success look like? It's not surprising to point out that science is littered with clever ideas that just didn't meet what people wanted to, and then never made any patient impact. So understanding what you're ultimately trying to achieve, what success looks like, and therefore what is going to deliver the most impact happens best when you get the people who are going to benefit from those opinions to start off with, be that routes of administration, side effects, all these things that go into drug development. And having an understanding of that early on, even before we get down to clinical development, really ensures you're facing the right direction and gives you the best chance of finding something that is ultimately going to be successful. And that's not even withstanding the resources we get from patients in early drug discovery, be it data, samples, biomarkers, all these things that are absolutely integral to giving us a chance of finding something which is ultimately going to be hopefully developed into a treatment.
That's a great point, Paul. Lee, can you tell us about how you define success? Yeah, what's success?
Success for me is having a pipeline of really promising treatments. I don't mean any treatment. I wanted to go back before phase 3 and really start preclinical work. So when we start phase 3, we nearly almost certain that it works. Yeah, or we are testing real safety. So, but success is a big thing, because some people want to try anything. But I don't want to try anything. I want to try optimistically.
Yeah.
And I think success has to be global. We're working with the USA, and I see very certain problems with the USA, which I don't see here. And we have to see how we can work together better with the world.
Absolutely. David?
Yeah, Lee, is it worth at this point, I don't think we haven't spoken about it recently, but that idea of a kind of global index of promising drugs. Remember that?
Yeah.
And anonymized, I used to work in like media and the financial markets where there's a lot of indices. Some of them are opinion, some of them are actually evaluated. But having some kind of clearing system for, the top 50 researchers in the world, how do you define that? Okay, that's a job. But let's get the top 50 researchers in the world in MND, come together, look at a prospect list of, 20 potential therapies. How do they rank them? Now, it's kept secret. You amalgamate that, but you come up with the top 10. So for example, and this is real. Lee and I, especially Lee, because of his scientific background, and Nicola, I'm sure, often get asked, what do you think is the best trial to go on? We don't know. But out there will be opinions, and the gathering of information like that is likely to lead to the most promising therapies being towards the top of the list. That is a real throw it out there. What do you think, guys? Idea.
Other disease areas are doing that really well as well, David. I think we can learn a lot from other areas, looking at the work that Parkinson's are doing, and it's something that we've talked about a lot. And I think it's a really important point to think about as a community.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. In fact, a similar thing has been done by the Michael J. Fox Foundation. They have assembled an expert panel advisory on ranking specific targets for Parkinson's disease, and they're going to release them. Asking the world to then develop things that are targeting specific molecules.
The other thing that kind of thing would do is prevent wastage of energy elsewhere. So there's been a couple of drugs recently, I won't name them, but we all know what they are, that have, ultimately been rejected or pushed back. And, there's an awful lot of emotional and time, energy wasted on concentrating on those. Even, for one of the trials, one of our leading stars actually backed a petition, and that got a lot of people believing, oh, this is going to be great. But, those of us that really kept close to it knew it wasn't going to be great. We'd rather you all concentrating on the best, the most likely, the most promising therapy.
Yeah, I can see here Professor Pietro Fratta, who is also part of the panel. Thanks for joining us. Would be great to hear your perspective on this. So you are involved in drug discovery and also clinical trials. Would be great to have your opinion on this.
Great, yeah. Hard to jump in the middle, but sorry, I couldn't make the first half hour. No, I mean, I was definitely keen to participate because, until now, most of our research has been really kind of in discovery, and so the relation in communicating stuff has been in, explaining basic science in lay terms, and now we're instead moving towards more translational points. So I was really keen to understand how the patient participation clearly changes in this phase, and there's much more of a direct, as Paul was saying, it's great to know what the impact is, but in basic science, I think we all have to be a bit more agnostic and say, hey, there's lots of cool stuff that is happening, and actually we don't really know which of this will be, translate better, but we should nurture all of it. While instead in the second phase, I think there's where the focus comes in, and it has to be more emphasized. In regards to what David was saying right now, I guess, the examples you were bringing, David, about these drugs that we kind of all knew maybe were not going to be great, but have been pushed through. But I guess, how does then, the MND community interact with, private entities that bring these ahead independently, right? It's not that I see how this can be useful in deciding how, the MNDRI maybe prioritizes its own targets. That would be great, but it kind of already does that. But I wonder what is the thought of how to interact more with entities that see a commercial opportunity and still pursue it, as has been, for example, in the cases of the drugs that I guess you were mentioning. So I don't know how those examples in Parkinson's disease, which Giovanna was mentioning, are. How does that work with the development of drugs in industry, especially in small,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite an experiment, because I know somebody who is on the panel who was telling me about this. It's very much something very lately. I mean, it has been done very, very recently. So they're going to release these targets, and they're going to potentially, just release them to the world, asking people to then develop specific therapeutic programs. I'm not so sure they're going to give any sort of funding particularly for that, but then just release this to the community to develop therapeutic treatments.
But I guess does that impact us as centers that recruit patients and adopt trials? Will that impact on what trials, like? I guess that is where is there a line to be crossed there? I mean, yes, here. I mean, I'm not primarily involved in trials here at Queen Square, but we have a patient population, we have a center, and we can adopt some. How do we decide which ones we adopt? Should that be a concerted? Ammar, jump in.
Pietro, can I just jump in there? So, Pietro, I think those points are exactly the nub of the issue. We have the MND Clinical Studies Group that meets every month, and that's 22 centres that are all research trial active. And we discussed there whether a trial should be included or not in our portfolio. So that's one way we can interact with the pharmaceutical industry. And the other way, which is at an earlier stage, is through the MND Research Institute. There is an industry forum where we have a two-way conversation with industry partners, and they speak to us and we speak to them. So there are two areas where we can influence, but you're right. And there's nothing to stop that company if we say, no, we don't want to do this in the UK. There's nothing to stop them going to an individual centre and persuading that centre to take part. And that is a potential issue, you're right.
Yeah, and then stop. But I guess also the issue of saying we're not supporting something is hard, right? Because maybe we don't think it's the best, but it's very hard. It's like I don't. Absolutely. I think it's easy to kind of say that it could be, but in practice it could be very hard. And also the other risk, is that the 50 leading experts may have good visions, but they may be missing actually what is going to be the real breakthrough here. So
but it's also worth remembering though, Pietro, I think you can have, there's a difference between necessarily dismissing something and endorsing it as well. I think the point David was making around prioritizing, if you had leading experts, patient groups, etc., coming together to prioritize, that's still very different than saying not endorsing, for example. And that's, I think, having that prioritization would give a focus and would give things perhaps a better backing and maybe even a transparency and better chance of success that maybe we don't have right now.
No, I agree, Paul, and I agree, David. I mean, it's not I'm against it in principle. I was just trying to see what practical small difficulties there could be, but yeah.
I would like to add how to make it also more scientific, like how this process could be more scientific rather than just like endorsing, or like how like industry also like trying to persuade center. And the same thing for drug discovery also, like which targets need to be selected. This process also need to be more like scientifically driven.
If I might, there is a caveat as well to ranking targets and drugs, which is, of course, that MND is a very clinically heterogeneous disease. And there are certain precautions that we need to keep in mind, such as endorsing one drug over another might mean that in the public eye, the interpretation from regulatory authorities is seen the same. And we've seen this with a nice decision on tofersen, that actually it's worth promoting as well, that it's probably not going to be one drug that's the best for MND. There's going to be multiple drugs for multiple instances of MND.
Yeah. Nitisha, your hand is up. Do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Dr. Ammar. Like, I want to thank like everyone for giving me an opportunity, because I am an PhD candidate in University of Manitoba, and since like 2019 I've been understanding what I have been doing in the ALS sphere. So like over years we are also working on developing one drug, but like over the years what I have understood, and especially from papers from Dr. Ammar. So like basically what's the need of the time for the ALS community is to understand what actually we want to address, whether the survival, whether the quality of life. And over the 100 years, like the research is being there, and we know, like Dr. Sophie just spoke about the multiple targets, because ALS is complex, like highly heterogeneous. We know from Lou Gehrig's to Stephen Hawking's, we know, like it comes with multiple pathologies. So I think one one solution could be to bring other researchers like medicinal chemist also, or chemist also, who actually design drugs to tailor the molecules. Because if you read paper from ACS, because I'm a medicinal chemist and I am also developing like my molecule in mice trials, so I've been into in vivo also. So if you read the papers from American Chemical Society, JMedChem, you will see how they are, some of the molecule they are leveraging, and they are making multiple target effects, like targeting 3 or 4 pathologies. So bringing one solution could be to bring other scientists to with clinician to understand better, and to direct the disease much better. And also very important, why to understand why we in 2024 is a year of unfortunate year. Every trial is being failed, so it creates a like hopelessness in the community. But however, we so we have to realize why this is happening. So this is we all know, and we are trying to understand, but we have to treat the patient like a patient, because it is very important. Because recently I saw some of the papers where researchers have used the targeting the protein and introduce the protein with very high doses. So like if you want to prove that the efficacy of the drug, I have to prove, just for the sake of publication, just for because I have, with the fixed mind setup, I have moved into this research, and I have already invested a lot of money. This is not going to work.
Thank you very much.
We have to we have to be with growing mind setup.
Thank you very much. So more diversity, and also research, and also for decision making. Lee, I can see your hand up.
This call has been very good. We barely touched the surface. But as David said, I've been lucky enough to live with this for 10 years. So I've seen what Ammar said we get a cycle of the same event. And if I look at America, and as David said, we don't have to mention the drugs, but there have been some catastrophic drugs out there that have been driven by advocates only, with zero scientific backing. And
lead back to this. I feel like the MND community been used also like again like heavily in certain scenarios, and how do you think like we should approach this also, since most of us here in UK, I feel like with the people with MND in UK are more aware of like scientific research than others. Maybe this is like biased way of thinking, but it feels like it's more of these. The patient advocacy from ALS is very heavy on many drugs with no evidence.
Yeah, when Ammar and others, Ammar, you know very well that a lot of scientists remain quiet. Yeah, they remain. I want scientists to be bolder.
Yeah. It is difficult.
Yeah,
carry on.
I was just going to say it is difficult sometimes for scientists, especially if you're quite senior, to speak out in certain situations, as much as we would like to. But I think, I mean, for example, we can do it through consensus statements, which we've done for NCALs and TRICALs, as you know. We put out consensus statements when an issue is particularly contentious for the public. And with that, it's not one person speaking out, it's a group of people speaking out, and that helps. So, but it does take one person at least to stick their head above the parapet to do that. And the thing is, you get the social media onslaught as a result, as you know.
But let me take the example without naming it, Ammar. It wasn't until 3/4 of the way through last year that consensus statement was made on one particular drug.
Yeah.
And it took 3 years.
Yeah.
I would rather it be 3 years ago.
So yes, to make a consensus statement did take 3 years, but it was done in a key time. So
yeah,
I know, but that example wasted 3 years of life.
Yeah, but that example, I mean, people had been arguing against it online and for it, but the advocacy was very, very strong and very aggressive. And it took some time for people to realize, actually, we need to make a consensus statement that kind of protects people from this onslaught. But even then, the people in the US weren't signatories, even though it was a US-based issue.
Yeah. Kevin, do you have any comment on this? Like, what's your insight from?
You mean in how we select drugs?
Yeah, and also how can also MND people help in this process?
Well, I think they can most help by understanding through our communication what the problems are. I mean, there are a limited set of resources, okay, both financial and human.
Yeah.
To do a trial is a huge undertaking. Many of the trials done in the past maybe should never have been done. They were done on weak evidence. And, you know, we have a moral responsibility, I feel, to have a process whereby we decide to do one trial rather than another. We're not just there as clinicians or indeed as people living with the disease to service the needs of a particular stakeholder in the pharmaceutical industry who happens to believe in their drug. So we have to have a critical process. And we get these emails that say, what's your capacity to do a trial? And I say, well, can you tell me what the drug is? Oh no, well, you have to sign an MTA before, and we want to know whether you've got capacity. Well, I don't have capacity to do trials that I don't know the drug. I need to understand whether there's any plausibility involved and decide which of the limited resources we have are going to be directed towards. So we need a process, and I think patients are absolutely critical in that, not least because they need to understand why we might say no sometimes, and then share that responsibility with us if possible.
Thank you very much. Also, Pietro, You've done really fantastic also research in drug discovery, and it was really like when I saw the presentation in ALS International ALS Symposium, I was like outblown like by the fantastic science that's been done. And one of the things like I was hoping like if you could communicate this kind of information outside of international symposium, like you got a lot of nice work in your lab happening, and how can we also communicate this research to outside?
That's a good question, Ahmad. I'm not sure I have a good answer here, but I'm a bit always worried, right, with technologies like that. And we've actually had this offer recently and of putting this into kind of an early documentary, a brief thing. Yeah. But, you know, it's really early research and we are really excited. I really hope it's going to transform gene therapy for ALS. But
yeah,
there's always that, you know, it is tricky. I kind of feel you need to, not you, but like things are hyped up for the general communication. Otherwise, they don't go beyond the threshold of being reported. But of course, when we communicate with patients, it's a very different audience. You don't need to hype things up for patients. Actually, even if you tone them down, typically they generate, you know, enough excitement that they have a very different perception. And so I find this a bit problematic. It's two very different audience, lay communication in general and communicating with patients. And so going back to your question, I think it should be done in a forum that actually privileges the latter. And so, you know, in communicating, yes, how excited we are, you know, it's that balance of really laying things down in a clear way, but also laying, you know, how clearly we're far from really having this being delivered, right? But to me, that's often something which I have a bit of a problem with when even the university, you know, yes, press release for the paper and all that, I feel often a bit uncomfortable. I mean, to some extent, who cares about making the splash on it being taken up by a newspaper when actually it's gonna, then you get all these emails and saying, oh, so when is this coming out? And this is not coming out. I mean, hopefully it will. Yeah.
I don't know what's the best way. Like how we press release it could be like also like looked at before maybe publishing by a committee, like by MND Institute maybe, or like which include also people with MND. I don't want to, but that would make it less. It add another level of delay, but still it make the communication might be better.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we try doing that. We try communicating along with the MNDA on their blog and things, and so commenting realistically. It's just that when things go in parallel avenues, sometimes they, you know, then they spiral a bit out of control.
Yeah.
I think the Aberdeen announcement a couple of months ago was a great example of that. And you could almost tell that it was being possibly pressurized by the university's commercial partners in getting it out. It you know, it really did annoy quite a few of us, that one.
Yeah, Kevin, do you want to add anything to it?
Well, you know, I think I've always just strongly believed that in openness, really, and it's not that we as researchers have, you know, some information that we don't want to communicate. I think, but you know, as a scientist, you've got to be, and you've been around for decades, like some of us have. You've seen lots of apparent breakthroughs come to nothing. You don't use words like that because this is a tough problem. And, you know, if it were not a tough problem, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So we need to all, what I'm really excited by having this kind of meeting is that we're sharing that, you know, that information, and we are sharing the collective responsibility that we're dealing with one of the most difficult problems in medicine, that we're doing it together. And I think that's for me what this communication is really about, not necessarily an individual study being communicated. I think as much as possible, we need to get every single person living with MND to share with us that, you know, this difficult problem. So maybe that sounds a bit vague, but I think more talking is good like this. So having something regular along these lines, I would be very happy to participate.
Thank you very much. Nicola, speaking about, go on.
Sorry, it's half term and my son has just arrived. It's just excellent timing. I'm just thinking, Ahmad, that I'd like to take an action away, maybe with the Institute, in maybe trying to reach out to a much wider group of people living with MND than me, Lee and Dave, and really just get their views on how they would like to engage, and also working with Sophie and the work that I saw they're starting to do, so we don't overlap with them, but really just getting some views on how we can engage more people with MND. So yeah, I think that's something I'll take away to do with the Institute.
Yeah, very happy to support that, Nicola. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you very much. I think we are already over time. I just want to say thank you to everyone, and I think we have an action here, and I think we would be great that the MND Institute also could adapt this kind of, and also with help of the UK DRI and also other partners, especially MND, put in a lot of effort on this. So we don't want to replicate effort, and I think this is completely different, rather than a blog, rather than also like podcast. It's more natural way of communicating, and where we just, like Ammar mentioned, someone with MND could just simply ask questions. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time. Hopefully we can meet more often. Probably, do you think meeting like this is a good idea every month? Like Kevin said, yes, Ammar, Lee, yeah, everyone. So probably if we organize, let's start with like every 3 months or 1 month.
I think 3 months is more realistic, Ahmed.
Yeah, so we do every 3 months like this. Probably then we could ask for like multiple updates from multiple also institutes. For example, there was so much happening. So then also Lee, David, and Nicola could update us also, like what's about trends also from the community, what we need to address. Also UK MND Institute, what's happening. UK DRI also like needs some update about research. Yeah, a new trial, new drug development without hype.
I will update you on the next meeting about my discussion with Kevin about using social media.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I put a link to our Twitter account in. We do have a Twitter thing. I put it deliberately in there for you, Lee. So have a look at.
Thank you, Ahmad, for all you're doing. Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
thank you. Bye-bye then.
Thank you.
Bye. Wake up. Mouse grid 3. Mouse grid 3. Remove mouse grid. Close window. Remove mouse grid. Close window. Go to sleep. Wake up. Close window.